Greetings. Welcome to our webinar today. Today's webinar, this is Todd Breckus, President of Myon. Our team here in Minneapolis is ready for this webinar entitled Supporting Fluency Instruction for All Readers. We are thrilled if you're joining us today via from all over the country. We've got several attendees on right now. We're going to get started. Today's topic is really important for not only us here at Myon, but for many of the teachers, administrators, and parents across the country thinking about literacy instruction, and really in our case how technology and literacy instruction and the role of fluency really makes a huge difference. We know that there are so many students who are struggling with reading, and we've seen the national statistics on fourth graders, and obviously as a company and as a nation, we want to improve these scores. For us at Myon, that's our mission, is really to build better readers. And as we build better readers, we will learn to do this through our technology programs and others. And one of the ways that we learn about great topics like fluency is from our research experts. And Dr. Tim Rasinski is one of these experts for the Myon team. Tim has been very involved with Myon. He's helped us to understand some of the things we're doing well and some of the things we need to improve on, and specifically guiding our future development. We're really excited about some things we're working on in the back room with Myon and our research team, like Tim and Metametrics and others that are helping to guide our future vision as well as to improve the product that we currently have. So I'd like to start by introducing Tim Rasinski. Dr. Timothy Rasinski is a professor of literacy education at Kent State University. His scholarly interests include reading fluency and word study, reading in the elementary and middle grades, readers who struggle, and parental involvement. His research on reading has been cited on the National Reading Panel and has been published in journals such as Reading Research Quarterly, The Reading Teacher, Reading Psychology, and the Journal of Educational Research. Tim served on the board of directors of the International Reading Association, IRA. He also has served as the co-editor of The Reading Teacher and the Journal of Literacy Research. In 2010, Tim was elected to the International Reading Hall of Fame. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Tim, but before I do, let me just look at the agenda for today's slides for our conversation. Obviously, I'm Todd Breckus, President of Myon and the creator and founder of this program, and under the great leadership of Capstone, we're here. And now we're going to have Dr. Rasinski talk about supporting fluency instruction for all readers, and then, time willing, we'll do a brief demonstration of some of the concepts that Dr. Rasinski discusses, and we'll have time throughout this presentation for your questions. If you'd like to answer questions, that would be great, because that would help us a lot. But if you'd like to ask the questions, please use the chat window on your GoToMeeting bar. If you can't find that, you can open up with the minus sign you'll see on the right bar there. It'll open up the panel, and you'll be able to answer chat questions. And Tim and I will be happy to answer those as best we can, or ask you to answer your own questions, if that's the case. No, just kidding. Tim, you've been waiting patiently, right. and through that long introduction, we're excited you're here today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Todd. Thanks for the nice introduction, and hello everyone, and thanks for being with me. I'm going to, let's see if I have control. Oh, I guess I do, of the slides here. It's interesting to think with a switch of a button we go from Minneapolis to Cleveland, Ohio, where I am at, or just outside of Cleveland. I've been talking about fluency for a number of years. Actually, as a teacher, I started as a teacher working with kids who are having difficulty, and just by luck, I was working on my master's degree at the time, and I heard these professors talking about this thing called fluency, and I wasn't sure what it was at the time, but it just sounded so intriguing, and I decided to work with some of the kids the children I was working with, these kids who, despite my best efforts, are making so little progress. I started to implement some of the fluency methods that I've written about since then. and lo and behold, these kids who previously were making not much effort, not much progress at all, began to take off. And so that was 30 years ago, and I've been talking about fluency ever since. It's not the answer to every kid's problems, but it is the answer to a lot of kids' problems, and I'll try to make that case for you this afternoon. I know for many of you it's lunch hour, so let's get going here. I think we've recognized that, after years of kind of out in the wilderness, fluency is finally, over the last 10 years, received some degree of validity. The Common Core Standards identifies those as foundational skills, reading fluency. Interesting that they put it grades 1 through 5. We just published an article last year in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy where we found that we have even high school kids and middle grade kids who struggle in fluency, and because they do, they have trouble with comprehension. But it's interesting that even though Common Core says fluency is important and hot, it's not necessarily the case in our field. Those of you who belong to the International Reading Association know that the IRA publishes a journal called Reading Today, and every October they publish this thing called What's Hot. They ask 50 or 60 experts around the country, what are the hot topics in reading? And I'm always interested in looking at that. Common Core, comprehension, these are the ones that are hot. But what about fluency? Let's take a look at that. Well, in 2009, 4 years ago, it wasn't hot, they said. And in 2010, it wasn't hot. In 2011, it's not hot. 2012, it's not hot. Golly, will it ever be hot? Let's take a look at 2013. Just a few weeks ago it came out, and it is still not hot. And here's the kicker. Not only is it not hot, these experts said it shouldn't be hot. Isn't that interesting? I think it should be hot, and I think that the reason it's not hot is because of the way it's being addressed. Yeah, fluency is being addressed around the country, but it's, those of you who are practitioners out in the field know how it is, where you hear this stuff about making kids read faster. And if that's what it is, increasing your DIBEL scores or speed reading, then of course that's not what it's all about. We want comprehension. In fact, I ended up writing an article called Why Reading Fluency Should Be Hot. It appeared last year in the Reading Teacher. And what I'm going to be chatting with you guys about is basically this information. I'm going to give you my email address at the end of the session, and if you'd like for me to send you this article, I'll be happy to. I can just electronically send it to you. Well, let's start with this little model of reading that I play around with. I've heard that fluency is a bridge between word recognition and comprehension, and I think it's true. As you see, I put fluency between word study and comprehension. Two basic components of fluency. One is in red. It's called automaticity and word recognition. That's half of the bridge, and it's our link up to phonics up here in word recognition. We want students to be able to recognize words, not just accurately. That's what we teach in spelling and phonics. We want automatic recognition. The theory of automaticity basically goes like this. We only have a limited amount of mental energy, every one of us, when we read. And if we have to use too much of that energy to figure out the words, even if we read them correctly and know what they mean, when we get around to this more important task down here, comprehension, we don't understand what we've read. It's not that we don't have the ability, it's that we used it up, decoding the words. We see these kids all the time when they read. They're slow, they're full of effort, so laborious in their reading. And I like to say God bless these kids for working so hard, but they're putting all their effort in the wrong area. What we want them to be is automatic in their word recognition. And I think you and I are the best examples of automaticity. When we read, we don't hardly ever stop and have to sound out or think about or analyze a word. Most of the words are instantly, automatically, holistically recognized. And what that means then is that we can give minimal attention to this top part, word study. We can give maximum attention to comprehension. And how did we do this? Well, through lots and lots of practice. They're wide reading, but also deep reading. But that's only half the bridge. You also see here this orange part is called prosody, and that's a linguistic term. What it refers to is expressiveness in reading. If I think about somebody who's a fluent reader, it's not somebody who reads fast. It's somebody who uses their voice to make meaning. We get loud, we get soft, we get fast, we get slow. And in doing that, what we're doing is we're adding meaning by changing our voice there. And I know we can all think of fluent speakers and that, but I also like to mention that this fluency, this expressiveness also happens in reading, even when we read silently. I think most people, when they read, actually hear themselves, and I think I've done surveys, and people actually have argued, yeah, of course I hear myself there. But I'd like to share with you a little study that was done a while ago. You know, I'm going to go back here for a second here, but oops, I guess I can't go back. Oh, previous, there we go. I wanted to share this little study here, but keep in mind that we want to develop automaticity and prosody. That's the key. It's not one, it's not the other, it's both there. But I want to focus on this prosody business here for a second here. This is a study done by the U.S. Department of Ed a couple years ago. And what they did was they had kids read out loud in their best voice, fourth graders, and then they had teachers listen to these kids reading and rated their expressiveness, not their word recognition accuracy, their expressiveness. So they had kids who were expressive readers. They read with good phrasing, expression, all that. The moderately expressive, the somewhat disfluent, and then what I like to call the robot readers, the kids when they read, they're slow, full of effort, you know, no expression, no enthusiasm. You know, they're getting the words right, but there's that joy that we often associate with fluent reading. Well, notice over here on the right, the silent reading comprehension score. The students who we rated as expressive when they read orally, when they read silently, their comprehension score was 249. Now, roughly that's equivalent to 5th, 6th grade reading level. These are 4th graders, so they're doing pretty good. But look what happens when we go down to the moderately expressive kids. Readers. There's a considerable drop in silent reading comprehension, 229. We go to even less expressive, I guess, a less expressive way of reading, disfluent readers, and there's another 20-point drop, 207. And then finally you have those kids who, although they get the words right, read them like robots. And of course, look what happened there. Now you have the lowest level of silent comprehension as well, 179. So here's the idea. Our goal in reading is to improve silent reading comprehension. How do you do that? Well, one way is to improve fluency, not only in terms of automaticity, but also this prosody or this expressiveness. And that's what's often missing in a lot of these fluency programs out there. They emphasize speed, but they don't emphasize expressiveness here. So keep in mind we want both of these things, both automaticity and prosody in our reading. And when we do, we're going to improve reading. What I'd like to chat with you about is this. How do we develop this? How do we develop automaticity? How do we develop prosody with our students? Or maybe I should ask, is it even happening? Are we teaching fluency with our kids? Well, I'd like to share with you very quickly. Most of you remember Reading First, President Bush's program for improving reading comprehension in our American schools. And the evaluation of Reading First was it really didn't do much good. Well, one of the things they did in this Reading First evaluation study was they sent out observers to Reading First and non-Reading First classrooms all around the country, and they basically asked the question, to what extent are classroom teachers in these programs actually teaching the elements, those, if you recall, those 5 pillars? Not just fluency, but also word recognition, vocabulary, comprehension. Here's what they found. Less than 5 minutes per day was devoted to fluency instruction in Reading First and non-Reading First classrooms. It didn't matter whether you were in Reading First or non-Reading First, less than 5 minutes per day, and in many cases it was actually 0. You got to wonder, 5 minutes per day is not very much, and you know it's at least it makes me wonder if maybe that's the reason why we had our reading scores have been flat for the past 20 years in this nation. Why, for example, that 38% of our kids are unable to read grade level material according to the U.S. Department of Education. 38, that's 2 out of 5. That even among adults, 1 out of every 4 adults, young adults, lacks the basic skills, literacy skills for required in a typical job there. If we can't get those students across that bridge from word recognition to comprehension, I like to think that they're stuck on that island called word study, and they'd never get fully down to comprehension. You have to have fluency to make that bridge. In fact, Sheila Valencia did a study along with some of her colleagues at the University of Washington a few years ago, where they looked at students who had difficulty in their state reading exam, a silent reading comprehension test. And what Sheila and her colleagues found was that it was those things, word recognition, fluency, that seemed to be major problems for these children that did not allow them access to comprehension here. My point in all this is that what we need to do is teach fluency to our kids in more than 5 minutes. I would like to suggest that we teach fluency 15 to 20 minutes per day. It doesn't have to be a huge amount of time, but it does need to be addressed. So, how do we teach fluency? Well, I write about it all the time. First of all, I think the importance of real literature, as opposed to some of these engineered or what I might call, I think some of us call decodable texts. The reason why I mention real literature and poetry is because, you know, it needs to be read with expression, and informational text oftentimes does not lend itself to expressive reading. And so if you're not reading material that's meant to be read expressively, how do you develop prosody? So I think real literature is a huge part. I think we need to work on word recognition with our kids. Before kids can cross that bridge, they have to have a certain degree of proficiency in word recognition. And I think of that as being part of fluency. So I do things like, well, some of you may know my word ladder books that have been popular over the country the last few years, games that we used to play with kids to help them learn about words and how they're sounded and what they mean. But we also need to model fluent reading for our kids, and that means read to our children. We know children who are read to on a regular basis have larger vocabularies, better comprehension skills, they're more enthusiastic about reading. But also when you read to your students in a fluent, expressive manner, you now have a model that you provide for your students. And if you talk to your students about your reading, you're giving them an opportunity to develop that, what we call metacognitive awareness of what fluency is there. I often read to kids, and not every time, but occasionally, maybe once every 3 or 4 days, we talk about Mr. Rasinski's reading. Did you notice how I raised my voice here but lowered it here? How about this dramatic pause? What were you thinking? And I want them to see that my use of my voice in this expressive reading was helping them understand and enjoy the material I was reading to them. Sometimes I read to them in a not-so-fluent manner. I might read like a robot, word by word, or I might read way too fast. And I can't do it very long before I'm getting funny looks from the students. They're saying, you know, and my response is, what's wrong? I got the words right? And, you know, we begin to notice that their understanding was hampered by my lack of fluency. So modeling fluent reading. Assisted reading, that's the one I'm going to focus on today, but let me just mention this idea of practice. You know, how do you become fluent at anything? It's through practice. But I like to talk about 2 kinds of practice, wide reading and deep reading. Wide reading is the kind of reading we do a lot of as adults and our students do. It's kind of like when you read something and you're done reading it, you might talk about it with a colleague, or students might discuss it among themselves, and we might do some extension activities with our students, but we move on to a new reading there. And clearly that's very important. But we often see students who are not fluent, not good readers. They read a story once and they don't read it very well. They don't understand it very well. And, you know, if we just move on to the next text for them to read in this wide reading manner, you know, they're going to move on to the next text, and they're not going to read that one very well either. It's one less fluent reading after another, and I like to suggest that if all we have our students do is practice mediocre or not so fluent reading, that's what we're going to end up with when our students take that end of the year or this high stakes state reading exam. I think sometimes we have to have our students read deeply there, and that's where you say to your students, read something not once but 2, 3, 4 times until you can read it well, and then we'll move on to the next. We want students to develop this sense of accomplishments, this sense of being able to read something well there. And I've come to call that deep reading. The technical name is repeated reading, where we ask kids to read something. The question with the deep reading, though, becomes what kinds of materials are meant to be read repeatedly. Well, and to me, that's where things like literature and poetry and song just are naturals, readers' theater, because they're meant to be performed a song or a poem or a reader's theater script. If it's meant to be performed, you have to rehearse it, and rehearsal is a form of repeated reading. But now, the one I really would like to share with you today, and I know we don't have a lot of time, is the one I've got here in red. It's called assisted reading. The assisted reading. That's another one of our building blocks, and I think this one lends itself particularly well to the elements of the MyOn reading program that you're going to hear about in a few minutes. Let me talk about assisted reading. I like to say it's like learning to ride a bike. And I go back, I tell the story of my own growing up. When I was 5 or 6, I got a two-wheel bicycle for my birthday, and it didn't have training wheels on it. And I remember how hard it was to learn to ride it. I would take the bike out after school and get on it, and I would just flounder on it. And one day, I still remember my father coming home from work, saw me floundering with this bike. He said, "Hey, Timmy, I'll help you." And he said, "You get on the bike, put your feet on the pedals and your hands on the handlebars, and I'm going to hold the seat, and I'm going to run with you, hold you up. And but you do the pedaling and you do the steering." And he did this with me for just, actually one day. We did around the yard a couple times, up and down the driveway. And I still remember him huffing and puffing after a couple times around. And after maybe 5 or 10 minutes of this, he says, "Hey, listen, you're on your own, kid. I'm going to get in the house to have a big cold beer." And he gave me a push, and next thing I knew, I was riding on my own. I didn't need his help anymore. And that's my point in reading. If I have somebody who, I'm not a good reader, I'm a struggling reader, if I have somebody who assists me, holds me up, holds up my seat while I'm writing, I'll eventually be able to ride without their help, or read without their help, I guess I should say. And that's what assisted reading is. Now that can take a variety of forms. But basically keep in mind it's this: if I'm not a good reader, but you are, and the two of us read together, or we read as a group, your good reading is going to help my reading, because as I'm reading something, trying my best, I'm also hearing your voice. And that's the key function there. Well, this assisted reading can take a variety of forms. The most common one, I think, especially in the primary grades, is choral reading. That's where a group of students read something, perhaps along with their teacher, and those students who may not be the good readers are listening to their classmates who are better readers and read at the same time. And again, it's that idea of doing this on a regular basis. Those children who struggle begin to acquire the reading abilities that are given to them by their more advanced or more successful readers there. My friend and colleague David Page at Bellarmine University has been doing some really interesting work on choral reading, even with older kids, and finding some remarkable results. Now, paired reading, or what used to be called neurological impress reading, or neurological impress method, NIM, is basically choral reading done with two people, sitting side by side. You could be a teacher and a child, a parent and a child, two readers, two students, but again, one of them is a better reader, and reading out loud and together, the same text. Now, they're not alternating. Some people think of paired reading as, oh, I read a line, you read a line, that sort of thing. No, it's we read out loud together, chorally in a sense. And again, the research on this is pretty amazing. You may be familiar with the work of Dr. Keith Topping out there in Scotland, and he's been researching and paired reading with parents especially, asking parents to sit side by side with their children for 10 minutes and read out loud together. He has a couple interesting parts to it. When the child wants to read on his or her own, they create some sort of signal so that the parent knows to be quiet, but basically it's just reading out loud together. What Keith has found is that children who do this with their parents would accelerate their progress in reading by a factor of 3. That is, if you were working with children who were making, say, a half month's progress for every month's worth of school, now they'd be making 1.5 months progress for every month's worth of school. It's not just in fluency, but also in word recognition, also in comprehension. Because as the way I like to see it is these children are crossing that bridge that we talked about earlier. Now, if you're not familiar with paired reading or neurological impress reading, I simply invite you to go to YouTube and search paired reading and neurological impress method, and you'll find 5 or 6 quick videos on how it's done. And it really is quite remarkable. We try to use it in our own reading clinic here at Kent State. Now, a third form is the interesting one, caption television. The research has come out that's shown, that when students read, when anybody watches television and reads the captioning, they're doing a form of assisted reading, and that has the ability to improve reading. The What Works Clearinghouse, for example, just did they reported maybe a few months ago about high school kids in an intervention program that involved fluency. But the interesting thing was, I forget what they called it, subtitling or something, but essentially what it was a karaoke reading, where students were singing songs while following the text that was presented on a television set. Again, but if you've never tried this, try it. You're going to find it's hard to keep your eyes off the words on captioned television. It's what psychologists call an obligatory process, which means try as hard as you like. It's really hard to keep your eyes off the words, which sounds to me like something you'd want for our students there. Okay. Oh, by the way, I might mention that Jim Trelease, in his book, the Read Aloud Handbook, says that one of the reasons why Finland has one of the highest levels of literacy among elementary grade kids, in fact, I think they have been #1 for quite a while, is because of the captioned television that the students watch in Finland. Well, parent-teacher conferences are coming up shortly, hopefully, and what a simple thing we could pass on to parents there. But here's the last one here, last form of assisted reading. Again, the idea is reading and listening. Well, what happens if you use technology, not just captioned television, but actually something that is dedicated toward that, book on tape perhaps, or a CD that has the book recorded? Would that improve your reading? And that's why I call it technology-assisted reading, because I don't use a tape recorder anymore. I use my computer. I use my own reading. Some of these programs that have already been designed exactly for that. But let me take you back to the history of this. I was mentioning to you at the beginning that I back in the 70s, when I was doing my master's degree, they had us reading some of these articles. And this is one that I really struck my eye. It was entitled "After Decoding, Then What?" by Carol Chomsky. It appeared in the journal Language Arts back in '76. It's hard to believe that's, oh boy, 37 years ago. That's been a while. But Carol was working as an intervention teacher in the Boston area, and she taught these children she was working with, kids who were having difficulty phonics, and they got it. But they weren't making much progress. They weren't crossing that bridge down to comprehension. So she decided, well, not exactly sure what to do here, but what I'll do here is record books on tape, and I'll have my students read them and listen to the tape simultaneously, so they're doing assisted reading, and I'll have them do it several times until they can read that book or that portion of the book without the help of the tape. What she found was pretty amazing. In fact, I recently just went back to this article. I constantly go back to it. But here's what she mentioned in her discussion. These kids started to take off, remarkably so. Look the couple quotes that I pulled here. One of the reasons was they practiced. They were reading large amounts of textual material. It was now available. They couldn't read it before because there was no assistance, but now because they were listening to somebody read, even though it was recorded, now they could handle that material. And of course, that was her goal, was to provide text in large quantities in an interesting and accessible form, so that their mind was engaged in interacting with the print, with making meaning here. Look at the last sentence. For a long time, these children's minds had been elsewhere when it came to grappling with the written word. In other words, their minds were up there, go back to my model, working on the words, not working on comprehension. Here's another quote from her. She mentions a boy named Tommy, and he had a quote he told his mom. He said, this listening while reading book on tape, it helps me when I can hear it while I look at it. It makes the hard words as easy as the easy words. I mean, that's exactly, sometimes from the mouth of the babes, that he could now read hard words. And the reason was that he was giving that assist. He had that tape was holding him up much like my father there. And I love what Carol wrote at the bottom there. You know, she essentially what she's saying is she was giving her students a quality reading experience. It allowed them to feel like they're real reading. They're the kind of reading that our good readers experience there. And many of our struggling readers, you know, they don't get that experience. So we want to do that. Here's what she found in the study. It was a small-scale study, but there was 15 weeks of this intervention, essentially 4 months times, actually a little less than 4 months. But the average gain that these students made in several measures of reading was 8 months, almost doubling the progress you would normally have expected them to make on this. So there's something incredibly powerful in here. Another, one more quote here, and here I'll let you read it on your own. It allowed the kids to feel successful. They're real literature. It wasn't mechanical anymore. It was real reading here. Let me mention one more study. This is a more recent one. Merlin Pluck is a teacher in New Zealand who was actually trained by Mari Clay. She created a 3/4 of a year intervention where students for 15 to 20, 25 minutes per day would read while listening to a recorded book. And again, they read it repeatedly until they could read it on their own. Here's what she found. Look at the red. In that 27 weeks, these students made over 2 years progress on average. Some more, some less, but it's quite remarkable when you say, especially knowing that previously these kids were struggling so that they were making less than a year's progress for a year's worth of instruction. Over half the kids were reading above grade level, and they maintained their gain over a 6-week summer break here. Pretty amazing stuff, and that's why I think this technology-assisted reading, the neat thing about it is not only does it provide the assist, it's something that frees the teacher, because if you use technology, it's not something where you have to be with the child, you know, constantly reading with them or reading chorally with them. They can do this on their own. And of course, that brings us to some of the programs, in particular mine on reading, that Todd will be talking with you about in a few minutes here. Almost done here. But there's one more problem here, and I alluded to that earlier, and that's the one on real literature. Those of you who are using some of these fluency programs that are on the market today, you may recognize that in most cases there's a lot of informational text that we have kids read. And I don't want to dismiss the informational text. We know that the Common Core is saying we have to be providing our students with more of that kind of material, and I agree. But it doesn't lend itself, you know, kids do repeated and assisted reading informational text. It does not lend itself well to reading with expression. There's not that sense of voice that Lucy Calkins and Ruth Cullum talk about. I like to say that, you know, voice in writing is the equivalent or the opposite side of prosody in reading. If it's written with voice, it has to be read with voice. And our informational texts often do not have a very compelling voice in them. They may be important, but they don't always have that voice. And if you think I'm mistaken, I'd like to invite you to try reading Evaporation or Igneous Rock expressively. It can be a bit of a challenge there. So again, I think, you know, that's the other piece here. We want to find the right material that is meant to be read with expression, that's in some cases meant to be performed there. So it's not just literature, poetry, readers' theater, even song. I have an article with a colleague of mine, a teacher from Connecticut, in this month's reading teacher about singing and the improvement it might make. It does make in our students' reading progress. So real books, that's what we want. And of course, one of the things you'll hear from Todd is that my reading is that's exactly what the program is made up of, not just assisted reading, but assisted reading of real books with kids. So here's the takeaway. Fluency has been neglected over the years. Dick Allington wrote that famous piece back 30 years ago, Fluency, the Neglected Goal of the Reading Program. And although it may not be neglected today, it's misinterpreted with this emphasis on speed. Secondly, we know that we see these reports in the newspaper all the time. Our reading improvement in the United States has not been as has not gone up as much as we would like it. In fact, in many cases, it's been stalled there. I hope I've convinced you, if you're not already convinced. Your presence listening to this webinar tells me that you think there's something here on fluency. But the takeaway is that fluency should be hot, and because not only is it reading with expression and reading automatically, it allows kids to go where they need to go, which is comprehension. Cross that bridge from word study to comprehension there. Don't let them be isolated on that island called words. And then finally, there are proven ways to teach and nurture fluency in real ways. It's not a matter of speed reading. It's a matter of modeling it for our kids, providing the assisted reading, and providing also the repeated reading, the wide and the deep reading also. Those are the pieces of the puzzle that sometimes get missed in our classrooms there. And then finally, of course, is the use of real literature. When we combine all these things, I think, and in fact, our own work in our reading clinic using these approaches, we find kids improving. Not only in comprehension and fluency and word recognition, but more importantly, confidence. We see these children becoming confidence readers and enjoying it and becoming real readers. And that's, of course, where we really want to aim for. So if you like, I will send you that article that I mentioned, but if you want to read a little bit more deeply, I do have this book out, Shamelessly Self-Promoted by yours truly. It's called The Fluent Reader. It's published by Scholastic, and it's a pretty easy read, but I've gotten some great responses from it, and it covers all the work I've done and all the work other people have done on fluency over the past 30 plus years there. But there's my email address, trasinski@kent.edu. Oops, okay, there you go. Don't know what I did on that one. So if you'd like for me to send you that article, just drop me a line, trasinski@kent.edu, and I'll just hit reply and attach the article. I'll send you a couple articles that I've written, and as just my thank you for all that you do for our kids and for your interest in fluency and seeing the possibilities there. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Todd, and he's going to spend just a few minutes talking a little bit more about this My Reading program. So, Todd, back to you.
Thanks, Tim. Wonderful job. That was just great. We do have some questions we're going to answer, so if you could hang near here so we can go over the questions. First one actually comes from me. Maybe the hot, not hot question is it around somewhat of some of the measurement techniques that people have maybe resorted to over the last decade or so. I mean, you see the teachers running around with stopwatches, and I don't know if you were like me, I didn't love being timed on my running, let alone on my reading to some degree. Have we hindered some things by some of our assessment methodologies, and are there promises for future opportunities for better measurement, better assessment?
Well, I think you're exactly right. It's the measurement technologies, basically the speed reading. I'm not going to name names. I think I already named one, and I shouldn't have. But how fast kids read. We call it the curriculum-based measurement, where they read for a minute. We count the number of words they read correctly, and the research does show it correlates with comprehension, their speed of reading, because the kids are more automatic. But what I'd like to say is, we think about every one of us in this listening audience. We're all fast readers. Did we become fast because our teachers did the stopwatch reading with us? No, I think what we did was we read a lot, and we just naturally became more fluent readers. So I think it's a way of measuring the speed of reading. It's an okay way of measuring progress, but it's not the way we teach it. We want speed readers, but we want them the right way, which is through lots and lots and lots of reading there. Also, I think one of the things we don't do is we measure that other part of fluency also, the expressiveness there. It's harder to measure expressiveness, but it's something also I think that should be part of the equation too, so that when kids read, they don't get the idea it's about reading fast. You see, I want to listen to your expressiveness, and I'm gonna be listening for the quality of that as well there. And I do have a rubric, and I'll I'm making all these promises, but if anybody wants the rubric we use to measure prosody or expressiveness, I'll be happy to send it your way as well. So, good
That's
point.
Great, Tim. No, finish. I'm sorry.
No, that was it. What I find is that I just noticed a few months ago our professional organization, International Reading Association, actually sent out a flyer electronically, and guess what was on the picture of the flyer? A stopwatch. And I just sighed. I just said, oh, geez, we're just perpetuating this speed reading. I think we're making kids read faster, but we don't see any growth in their comprehension as a result of that.
Okay, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it seems like the opportunity to make this an authentic experience, which you're promoting, will make this a hot topic if we can do it well.
Exactly.
As a group of practitioners, researchers, educators, and companies like ourselves who are going to delve into this in much more depth, not to hint at too much of our future, but we're really researching this, as you know. So we do have another question from the audience. This is from Carolyn. Her question is, when reading from an anthology, should teachers in primary grades practice repeated readings using a paragraph or a whole story?
Oh, that's a great question, and my response is to find something that is not too long. So if the whole story is only 2 or 3 or 4 pages, or 8, 10 pages, and it's a picture book, then you could probably do it several times through the entire book. But if not, and this is even if you're working on a chapter book, what I like to do is find just a segment of something, maybe where there is a dialogue or a rich description of a text that lends itself to expressiveness, and that would be the one that I would want to have kids practice, because if you get a text that's too long, then you can't repeat it very often, and it becomes a bit of a boring experience. Read it twice or 3 times there. And when you find something that has dialogue in it, or is a rich narration, those are things that can be actually read with expression, can be performed for an audience there. What we often do is we break up a story into portions, and we have 5 or 6 children each get a portion of that story. They'll rehearse it the day before, and then, as we call radio reading, where the kids actually will perform it the next day, each one performing their segment, but they have to read it fluently for it to be performed.
That's a great response, Tim. Thank you. Why don't let's jump now over to Mayan. First, just a couple reactions. What we have seen in the classroom with Mayan, it's across the board, and many of the things you've stated. Again, it's about getting access to the authentic literature, and even some great nonfiction that can be pretty fun to read. And looking at that, we really have seen a tremendous amount of choral reading, a lot of repeated reading. Children, you'll see them read out loud even to themselves after hearing it read fluently. And again, the variety of literature, the variety of audio and actors reading, to find that an actor that reads with such great prosody or intonation, and hear that different fluent reading. So let's jump over to our slides. We just have a few slides here to talk about Mayan. For some of you on this webinar, you're very familiar with Mayan, and others, you've never heard of it before. So Mayan as a platform is basically an interactive book platform that has 4,000 of the best books out there and growing. And the 5 pillars of Mayan are personalization, content, collaboration, and success. So what we mean by these 5 pillars are, 1, that children should have a personalized library of content available to them and give them unlimited access and a collaborative environment to produce success. And so that's what Mayan is. If you think about it, it's their own personal digital library, backpack of books, of these 4,000, and actually it's even more than 4,000 now. With our third-party publishers that we've added to the platform, we are nearly at 5,000 interactive books of nonfiction and fiction. We have reading levels everywhere from the beginning readers to the 1,300 Lexile levels, including bilingual and dual language Spanish titles. So we even have fluency in our Spanish language titles. And a growing list of publishers like great publishers that you're familiar with, Little Brown, winners of award-winning children's books. And obviously, we'll show you a few more of those in just a second. But the capstone titles are included in our base package, and that includes 70% of our library, which is nonfiction, and 30% fiction. From some of our great titles like Katie Wu, who's won some award-winning books. We just got a New York Times review over the weekend on a book called Here I Am, which is actually probably not a great topic for fluent reading because it's a silent reading book. It's a really great book for a picture-only book, which is basically having children think about their own visualizations of those stories. Additional publishers, like I said, Little Brown, DK, Orca Books, Saddleback, Zest Publishers, a nice new little publisher out of California, Highlights for Children, and many of the other titles you're probably very familiar with are all available on the MyOn platform. The MyOn platform starts by asking a student, what are you interested in? What are your interests? And rate those interests from basically a 1 to 5 level. Excuse me, do you like sports? Do you have hobbies? Do you like books about yourself? Do you like books about science, mathematics, etc.? The student also, if they're in grades 2 and above, are presented with a placement exam. And that placement exam is produced by Metametrics, who publishes the Lexile Framework for Literacy. So we're sure that that student can find the just right book that's in their level. And the system, like Netflix or Amazon or these other personalization systems, will help find the right books for you. You're still able to go and browse books that are all over the place, and we're going to do that right now. We're going to jump into MyOn. Additionally, our assessments also measure students after they read every 5 books, so they get an ongoing curriculum-based measure of their Lexile, their text complexity. We also have comprehension questions built into every book, and an ability for a natural, authentic assessment to be balanced with a natural, authentic opportunity to find reading. So we're going to log in right now, and this is the product. It basically, we're started at the library, and as you see the library, you can see we have the recommended tab. As we click on the recommended tab, we will see books that are within 150 Lexiles of my current Lexile range. And these books, this is a younger reader. She's also shown that she's interested in some Spanish titles as well. But if I go up to her her account, and Morgan, I can see her account in the upper right corner. The ability to see my current Lexile level, the ability to see what books I've read, what books I've completed, to even watch my progress overall. And I apologize if the web is a little slow for you all. We noticed that it's tracking a little slowly, so I'll slow down just a little bit. The student can see all of their information. And then we can also go to the All Books tab and see information about the books that she's interested in reading, and then actually listen and read books. So our options are to listen to books, to read books. The teacher can turn that setting on or off, and we can find all kinds of great material based on the subject we're interested via a text search. So we could search anything like science topics or language arts topics, etc. So that's the basics of MyOn. Let's just see if there are any questions here. The first question is, and maybe Tim, this is for you, how MyOn as a platform and as a product supports some of the fluency. You mentioned as a digital tool, but how does it support some of the fluency? And we can also bring up a book to demonstrate this as well if we need. But maybe Tim, if you're still there and unmuted, we need to make sure we can hear him. If you could answer that question about how you see that kind of connection.
Well, the things that I mentioned earlier, two things in particular I think are valuable. Number one, The books are presented orally to students, so they can hear a fluent rendering of the text, which of course gives them a model to which they can aspire. And then secondly, as they're reading, they can also listen to the text read to them. So there's that assisted reading in a technological format. So they are doing the assisted reading with real, authentic literature. So in a sense, it's almost the perfect combination of things. I love that idea. You mentioned the backpack. You've got a backpack of 4,000 plus books that you can choose from, and you can read every one of them successfully because of the support that Mayan gives you.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. Okay, so we brought up a book in the background, and Tim mentioned how kind of maybe non-interesting some nonfiction is. So I decided to bring up a nonfiction book that is clearly very uninteresting to a 10-year-old.
Right.
Let me go backwards here. So we are already in the idea of Newton's laws and forces in motion.
Zombies and Forces and Motion by Mark Weekland, illustrated by Gervasio. Chapter 1, Zombies in Motion. The world is full of motion. Birds fly through the air. Cars speed down dusty roads. Zombies stagger around graveyards. Hundreds of years ago, a man named Isaac Newton.
So as you can see, we're introducing nonfiction topics. We've got a narrator reading certain passages. We've got content that's brought about that is going to engage these students and try to basically, in some ways, trick them into some of the things that they're really interested in. Now, you did mention erosion, too, so maybe not quite as exciting as Zombies and Forces in Motion, but not so bad when you can see these great images and concepts.
Right.
The forces of change. A brick building on a street corner is crumbling away. A deep crack runs through the parking lot.
So in this case, we're trying to introduce the topic of erosion through something that is authentic and interesting to kids, creating lots of images and pictures, and creating a storyline where they're going to see topics like erosion. And obviously for us, even the ability to present lots of fiction also, and some really dynamic fiction. So we can go in and take a look at, let's do a text search here for one of my favorite series. Let's take a look at The Library of Doom, which is our favorite for our librarians in the audience, of course. So we've done zombies already. We'll do paper bats. So this is a book where we're going to hear a fluent reading for a high-low reader. This book is geared, let's see what the Lexile level on this book is. This is a 570, but it's really for a struggling reader. So a struggling reader that might be 2 or 3 grade levels behind is listening to a set of text that's engaging and interesting to them, but also read at a nice
Attack of the Paper Bats from the library
at a nice level. Let's listen here.
Chapter 1, The Book Left Open. A book lies open on the street. The book belongs to the Library of Doom. It was stolen from the library many years ago.
So we added, obviously, some soundtracks, some creepy music, some ideas that getting across this great topic, this idea of setting up a situation, hearing a story, having the student kind of grasp that setting, and then driving them into a story that's going to be told. So all in all, this is a great way for teachers and administrators to organize this digital library content, to have, in a sense, 4,000 actors walking around with that virtual backpack of 4,000 books and reading on demand to that child and hearing those books read. Obviously, our next stage of this is, what could we do more with technology? Where could we go that helps us beyond where we currently are with Fluency? If we've got 4,000 interactive digital books that are all being monitored and organized, we know how long the student has spent reading that book or listening to that book. We know how long that book is read by an actor. And then what tools and technologies might we be able to bring to the classrooms that are innovative and next stages. Those are some of the things we're really interested in, and why we're working with Dr. Rasinski and why we're considering other ideas is because we do believe the topic of fluency is hot, and it should be hot. And it's that combination of providing a balanced approach in terms of how much content we have, a ongoing measuring ability that happens naturally, not everybody sit in the row and take your number 2 pencil and bubble your way through literacy. Our plan and our direction is, as we continue to provide unlimited aspects of content, ongoing measurement, and next generation tools to think about measuring and helping the classroom with fluency, we're really engaged and excited about this topic. So unless there are any other questions, it doesn't look like there are, I'm going to say thank you again, Tim, and to my team Mayan here who helped put this webinar on. We appreciate it. If you do have further questions, you can visit Mayan.com for more information about Mayan. And again, as Dr. Rasinski gave his information, you can email him at, I'm going to pull it up in just a second, trasinski@kent.edu. And there it is. So with that, thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the afternoon, and we appreciate your time on today's webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Tim.
Todd, are you still there?